Welcome along to Eye on Africa, our daily look at the stories making headlines across the continent. Coming up. The search for missing people continues in eastern DR Congo after last week's devastating floods. At least 400 people are now known to have died in South Kivu province. In North Kivu, meanwhile, 10 people have been killed in fresh landslides. Tunisia's Jewish community is still in shock 2 days after an attack at the Ghriba synagogue, which killed 5 people, including a French citizen. French prosecutors are investigating it as a terrorist incident. And South Africa rejects accusations by the United States that it's providing weapons to Russia as it wages war in Ukraine. The allegations date back to December. Pretoria could face Western sanctions if they are found to be true. I'm James Mulholland. Thanks very much for joining us here on France 24. We start in Democratic Republic of Congo, where at least 10 people have died in a landslide a week after heavy rainfall created catastrophic flooding in the east. The fresh mudslide came late Tuesday in the Miringati village in North Kivu province. In South Kivu, the search for missing people continues in the territory of Kalehe, where over 400 people are now known to have been killed. Here's the latest from our team in South Kivu.
Almost a week after deadly mudslides and landslides, survivors and authorities are looking for the missing on Lake Kivu.
We've been alerted that some bodies are still floating on Lake Kivu. We are looking for them.
Red Cross volunteers discovered 3 corpses that day. They must be buried quickly to avoid the spread of diseases. More than 430 people were buried in 7 days. In the Kalehe territory, survivors say they are going through hell. Nyamukubi is one of the most affected villages. Nabunani has been digging tirelessly for a week in search of his relatives.
This is what's left of my house. My 4 children are dead. My wife is dead. I'm trying to find them and bury them with dignity. Someone help us, please. We've lost everything.
For those affected, surviving grief and trauma is hard enough. But basic necessities like water, medicines, and shelters are also missing. Authorities have provided flour and corn, hardly enough to fulfill the victims' needs. Shosho has built herself a tent from scratch.
We use this plastic sheet as a shelter. Our house was destroyed. We have no water or nothing to eat. We are really struggling.
Authorities say the top priority is now to relocate the victims. It is still the monsoon season in South Kivu.
As soon as next week, we'll send a team to assess sites and see which one could temporarily accommodate people. We're exploring the old airport option, but in the meantime, we're also looking for a permanent solution we will discuss with site owners.
According to humanitarian organizations, more than 3,000 families are homeless in the Kalehe territory today.
Next to Kenya, where volunteers are helping to enable people in poor neighbourhoods to prepare for flash floods. Their work includes teaching residents how to read weather maps as well as concrete measures on how to reduce the potential damage from flooding. Olivia Bizon tells us more.
Armed with shovels and rakes, these climate activists are on a mission to make this poor neighbourhood in Nairobi more resilient to extreme weather events. They've been warned about potential flooding by Weather Matani. The group translates weather warnings into local dialects and then sends them out to residents so that they can be prepared.
Weather Matani sent us a message warning us that it might rain and that we should be ready. We're not sure if it will rain or not, but we must be ready and inform our neighbours to take rightful measures. We warn children not to play near rivers, we look out for faulty underground electrical wires and unclog water drains, so that if the rain comes, we will not be caught off guard. That is how we stay ready.
Volunteers at Weather Matani are trained by Kenya's Meteorological Department, which teaches them how to interpret weather maps and diagrams.
We made a tailor-made forecast for them, and we were able to train them on how to interpret. With this, we've seen that this information is very key to them because they need it for their day-to-day activities, planning of their day-to-day lives. And this has helped most of them to save life and even property.
Nairobi's Kibra neighbourhood is particularly vulnerable to climate change-related weather disasters. In 2021, 4 residents were killed and hundreds of homes were destroyed in torrential floods.
In Tunisia, 2 days after the deadly attack at the Ghriba synagogue, the Jewish community in Ghriba is still in shock. 5 people, including a French citizen, were killed when a police officer opened fire at the site of Africa's oldest synagogue. French prosecutors have declared it a terrorist attack. France 24 spoke to pilgrims who travelled to Ghriba for the annual Ghriba pilgrimage and members of the small but tight-knit Jewish community.
Since the tragedy, Lauren Lelouch has mostly stayed within the hotel grounds. Travelling from Paris, this was her first trip for the Jewish pilgrimage in Ghriba. Still in shock, she doesn't want to stay too far from the police trucks parked outside the hotel. On Tuesday, she was less than 20 meters from the shooting.
And then my cousin was screaming, "Lauren, it's not firecrackers, it's gunshots." And suddenly I saw children running everywhere. I saw a policeman getting down on the ground, so we only had a few moments to react because we didn't understand. We were totally exposed. I have a feeling of guilt, a feeling of miracle, and a feeling of shock. Because those images, I don't know if they will ever get out of my head.
It will take time to heal. Ghriba had already been targeted in attacks in 2002 and 1985. Rudy Saada, a journalist, is pessimistic about what's next.
I spoke with some pilgrims, and from the few I've heard from, they feel broken. They are disgusted by the attack. It may take some time.
In one of the Jewish neighborhoods on the island, Lahara, most shops are still closed during the day as a sign of mourning. But at night, some of them open up and offer comfort to the community.
It's a really big tragedy, but that doesn't stop us from needing to carry on living. And nowhere is safe. It has to be said, because you know it happens everywhere.
Off camera, many Jewish Gerbans tell us about the sadness of not being able to say goodbye to the bodies of the 2 killed pilgrims. In France, anti-terrorism prosecutors have launched an investigation into the killing of one of its nationals in the attack.
Fadil Ali-Riza and Lilia Blaise with that story. Now to South Africa, which has rejected accusations from the US ambassador to Pretoria that it's providing weapons to Russia as it wages war in Ukraine. The allegations date back to December, when the US says weapons were loaded onto a cargo ship which had docked secretly near Cape Town. Pretoria could face Western sanctions if the accusations are found to be true. Nadine Theron has more from Cape Town.
South Africans are sceptical about its government's claims that weapons meant for the war in Ukraine were loaded onto a Russian vessel in Cape Town last year. President Cyril Ramaphosa says there is no evidence that this is what happened when the Lady R docked in Simonstown in December. Ramaphosa was responding to claims made by the US ambassador to South Africa during a briefing following a meeting between high-level US officials and a presidential delegation. The purpose of the meeting was for South Africa to clarify its stance on the war. Ruben Brigitte told the media that supplying weapons to Russia is fundamentally unacceptable and that this is an inexplicable deviation from South Africa's public neutral stance on the war. Brigitte says he can bet his life on the accuracy of the decision that artillery and weapons were loaded onto the Russian boats. Ramaphosa says the matter was discussed, but that it was agreed that an investigation by US intelligence services would be allowed to run its course. Brigitte says the US is also unhappy about the ruling African National Congress's accusations that the West provoked the war in Ukraine in its policy documents. He says this is outrageously false. The South African government is now launching an independent inquiry led by a retired judge into the matter. But citizens find it hard to believe that Ramaphosa's government doesn't know if weapons were loaded onto a Russian boat at its naval base in Simonstown or not.
Nadine Theron in Cape Town there. Ghana's president, Nana Akufo-Addo, has visited neighbouring Burkina Faso for the first time since a diplomatic spat over his remarks about Russian mercenaries. The visit was closed to the press, but Akufo-Addo is understood to have met military leader Captain Ibrahim Traoré to discuss regional security. In December, the Ghanaian president sparked a standoff when he accused Ouagadougou of inviting in mercenaries from Russia's Wagner Group. Justice Baidu has more from Accra.
The first time that Mr. Akufo-Addo is traveling to Burkina Faso since he claimed in a meeting with American government officials that the Burkinabés were working with Russian mercenaries in their attempt to contain jihadists that are fomenting trouble in the country. The comment triggered a diplomatic storm between the two neighboring countries, with Burkina Faso summoning the Ghanaian ambassador in Ouagadougou. Only last week, more than 44 people were killed along Burkina Faso's border with Niger. The attack is only the recent in a series that has ravaged the country. Ghana has survived some of these attacks that has occurred in several of its neighbors, but with the increased activity that is going on with jihadists along its border with Burkina Faso, analysts have suggested it may well be a matter of when and not if that Ghana too has its own share of the problem. More than 4,000 people have recently crossed the border from Burkina Faso into Ghana, into refugee camps that have been set up by the United Nations. Analysts have also suggested that these camps may now be the new threat where attacks may be launched from. The instability in Burkina Faso has also exacerbated the cost of living in Ghana. The country imports more than half of its vegetable produce from Burkina Faso. As instability continues up there, women who travel to markets in Burkina Faso are unable to travel to bring in some of these produce, and the cost of living as a result have worsened in the country.
Finally, to Senegal, where the youth in Dakar have been learning a new form of expression at graffiti school. RBS Academia is the school, and it trains up young would-be street artists, but before they can begin redecorating the city's walls, they have to start old school, with pencil and paper. Take a look.
I was at school, but I could no longer concentrate on my studies. And since I really enjoyed drawing, I decided to leave school to come here to improve my skills.
For me, graffiti is a tool that allows me to express myself. While people are in the streets to demonstrate with violence, art allows us to be noble and to put messages on the walls that will not go unnoticed.
That's it from us for now. Up next is the international headlines. Stay with us here on France 24.
A programme about women who are reshaping our world. We meet those who seek equality, be it in the boardroom or at the village well. The 51% brings you stories from across the globe about the women who are challenging the way we think.
The 51%, presented by Annette Young on France 24 and France24.com.